Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 761. I started off with d4. My opponent played f5, the Dutch defense. So I don't have any single recipe against the Dutch defense. I've tried various things, and this time I was just going with c5, and I was just going to go with the classical setup, these two pawns here, the knight on c3, and then maybe a fianchetto of the bishop to complement it, and later figure out what to do with the king's knight. So he went with e6, which leads to the classical Dutch. If he wanted to go with the Leningrad Dutch, he could start with knight f6, and after I went knight c3, then he could go g6 at this point. And this is the Leningrad Dutch. It's another principled way of playing with the Dutch defense, and a favorite of Nakamura. The classical somehow is considered a bit riskier, although, well, my opponent made some mistakes in this game, but I don't know why that should be considered so risky. Maybe because black ends up with a cramped position and it's a little harder to get counterplay. Let's see. So I went knight c3 here, and he went bishop b4. I was surprised by that bishop b4 move. Usually it's preceded by knight f6, but bishop b4 is part of the plan, so it turns out this was not any kind of mistake. It's second choice in the database, and I have a wide variety of ways to play from this point. E3 is the top choice, but queen c2 or queen b3 defending the knight, and maybe even queen b3 harassing the bishop. They make a lot of sense. But g3, just continuing with my setup, is okay as well. Now he went knight f6, went bishop g2, and then he went knight e4. And this move is not in the opening book, so we can just switch to the tab here. And it's not a bad move at this point. My knight is pinned, and it's kind of an interesting way to play. It made me wonder, since he played the setup very quickly, it made me wonder if he was had played this way before, if this was like his little pet line. But it doesn't seem like it, because he makes a mistake almost immediately. I mean, I play the natural queen c2. Obviously, he's threatening to win a pawn there, and also, not only that, when he takes back with the bishop, it'll be a fork of the king and the rook. So defense is necessary there. I suppose instead of defending, I could have traded the knight, but I didn't want to give up my bishop for his knight at this point. But his next move seems to be a bit of a mistake, b6. After b6, I could already take the knight. Bishop takes, pawn takes, queen takes, and I'm a pawn up, although he has a very active position, so he can actually do okay from here. I think it's not winning for white just yet, but definitely it's a blunder. What's interesting is that instead of b6, the chess engine is actually recommending a certain pawn sacrifice. It says black should go ahead and castle here and lose the pawn this way, just go for quicker development with putting the rook on the open file. And now if I grab the knight and take back with the queen, play with d5, just opening up more lines, forcing me to move my queen again, and then play with c5. And well, I'm a pawn up, but black has open lines for all his pieces, easy development, and yeah, the chess engine rates black as an advantage, rates this as an advantage to black, even though black is a pawn down. So pretty interesting. In fact, it says after he castles here, I shouldn't take the pawn. I should just keep developing with knight f3, and we might get a very typical kind of Dutch position like this. Is kind of position I've seen before, although this advanced knight on e4 still a little bit questionable. Anyway, but that would be fine for white as well as black. So b6 is a slight mistake, but I didn't take the knight here, so my mistake was just continuing to develop and not take advantage of his early knight e4 move there. So I go knight h3. He goes bishop b7, and now the knight's defended, and well, my knight is pinned. There are 3 pieces attacking the knight and only 2 defending it, but one of the attackers is pinned, so it hardly counts. But I castle immediately, so now the knight is really under threat, and he castled. So this is actually a blunder, because now, as compared to the earlier pawn sacrifice where he castled on move, if he had castled on move 6, my development is much better now. I've already castled. I've got all my pieces out except for the dark squared bishop, and so there's no harm. In fact, taking this pawn is good for me. So I don't actually get the most out of this. The chess engine, let's see, oh, he took with the pawn right away, but I keep taking. And the chess engine rates this as winning for white. It gives an advantage of greater than +2. So he tries knight c6 here, and so I played kind of a slow move. I played a3 to kick the bishop back, but well, you know, it's a trade-off. Sometimes you should be looking at how to bring more pieces into the game, and sometimes you should be looking at what you should do, what you can do with the pieces that are already developed. And there's a nice sequence the chess engine finds here, exploiting the fact that I've got my pieces already out, and without even needing to develop the bishop, I can immediately go on the offensive with this knight g5 move. It's one of those things that makes chess difficult, by the way. You know, there's these general rules like bring more force into the attack, but then in each specific situation, you always have to look at what's available to you and select the best option, not be too biased one way or the other. So knight g5 is a good move. It comes with an immediate mate threat, and well, it's not so hard to defend that pawn. And of course, playing h6 still allows the mate. So g6 is pretty much forced. And then d5. I had noticed this d5 idea. I was wondering about it, kicking the knight, and let's see if he goes, well, the best move is for him to go to knight a5. And at this point, you can see the idea. The fact that I was able to get these two moves with tempo means that now I can take on e6 and just win a pawn here and break down his center as well. So that's how you get that +2 advantage. And if he tries to exchange first, then move the knight, it leaves his bishop hanging. The bishop is just loose over here, so that loses a whole piece. So so there's no way to save that pawn. So it's pretty interesting. And it starts off with this knight g5. So it's a combination of knight g5 followed by d5 actually wins one of the center pawns. So that takes a little bit of time to see. I don't mind missing something like that in a blitz game, but in a long time control game, you should look for little things like that. Look for those forcing moves and see if you can figure out if there's a way to get an advantage out of it. Anyway, so I'm playing simply here. I kick the bishop back. The bishop dropped back to e7. And then I brought my queen to d3. This is okay. I'm just getting out of the way of the e-pawn, just grabbing more space in the center before bringing my bishop out. Because I wasn't really sure at this point where to put the bishop. And one idea would be to put it on e3. And it might be nice to get the e-pawn out ahead of the bishop. Anyway, he went queen e8. This is a very typical attacking idea with the Dutch. And I go e4. He goes queen h5. And I go knight to f4. So this is a good move. Instead of just rotely following my plan of playing bishop e3, I spotted this slight weakness that the queen is not really well placed over here, and there's not a lot of supporting pieces around. The bishop, in particular this dark squared bishop, is not hitting any particular targets over here. My pawn formation is very solid. He doesn't have any pawns to launch forward at the moment. He might, I think he does eventually push forward with the g-pawn, but and he doesn't have a knight to hop in easily, and this knight is screened out by my my big pawn center here. So so this is a good time to look around for other moves, and I found this knight f4 move, kicking the queen. And now the queen really has to run back to f7, and then you know, it's still a position where white is a pawn up, but it's not necessarily a complete win. The game could continue for a long time, and of course I can always make mistakes. But the move he played, he went after knight f4, he went queen to g4, and this actually loses. And I found the winning combination here. It's not obvious right away that it's a loss, but after you kick the queen with either h3 or f3, either one works. The queen doesn't have any good squares to go to. The knight is controlling this square and this square, and the pawns are controlling these squares. So the queen dropped back here, and it's just a target there, so I just had to look around at this point. The tactic is fairly easy to spot. Knight takes e6 with the tempo on the queen. So the queen went over to h5, and I grabbed the exchange. And from here on out, really, I'm just winning. Although he does get the rook into the game quickly with tempo, so I have to be a little bit careful. And my h-pawn is hanging. So I played king h2, and now he goes g5, trying to get more force into the attack. And I went bishop e3. I think bishop e3 was a mistake. I wanted to get the bishop out of the way of the rook. I probably should have just gone to d2, so my rook could come over here to e1, up and over, and start challenging his pieces along the f-file. I just have to get my pieces over to where his pieces are, and should be a very straightforward win. You know, when you're up the exchange plus a pawn, that's almost always a win. So bishop e3, though, gives him some ideas for counterplay because it screens the queen. I've just been talking about how the f3 square is not available because my queen's protecting it, and now I've just given him that square. He could have gone queen f3 immediately. That's not too much different. I mean, he's still not winning, and I still, as in the game, I just have to proceed a little slower. Maybe either defending the queen so I can move the bishop, or bringing the rook to the e-file, stepping the queen out of the way, and then moving the bishop. Or maybe queen here to challenge his queen. Eventually I unwind, and he's not breaking through. His attack is just a little too slow. So even if he's got his pieces over here ahead of mine, there's still not a win there. Anyway, he went with g4. So I played h4. Didn't want to allow him to open up any lines over here. Now he played rook f3, taking advantage of that square that I gave away. I dropped my queen back to d2 to unpin the bishop, and still I have this idea of bringing over the rook, moving the bishop out of the way, and then bringing my rook up to challenge his rook there. And he went knight d8. He's trying to figure out a way to get his knight into the game, and notice that from this square I just didn't have any places to go that were closer to the action, so he has to go this kind of roundabout way. I continue with my plan of rook to e1, and then he went c5. So maybe that was his second idea, was to get his knight out of the way so he could play c5. But this is just a big mistake, which he realized after he took here, because this opens up the d5 square. So this check will force a queen trade, and that will be an easily winning endgame with me being up the exchange plus a pawn. And but if he retreats the queen, which is maybe the best move here, then I can still give the check, and then I can take over here and just start mopping up pawns on the queen side, so I'll be up even more material. So let's back up one move. At this point, he resigned. So a short game, but interesting, and I always like to play the, well, it's always good to get a defense like the Dutch on the board in one of these Blitz games, because it gives me an opportunity to learn more about it. Like I said, I don't have any set way of playing against it, but well, what I tried this time seemed to work pretty well, so I guess I will stick with that for a while. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you later.